What's happening, YouTube? Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Ryan Thomas, diving into all things UFC 251. A ton to dive into on this fight card. But you know what? I dove into it already. Unfortunately, for the YouTube audience, I dove into it already on the Twitter side of things. I dove into it on the Thomas Take post-fight reaction show on Trainwreck Sports, the Twitter, on the Trainwreck Sports Twitter, I should say, the UFC 251 post-fight show. But I like to dive into what is next for some of the fighters, some of the winners and the losers of UFC 251. I think in particular, it's a lot easier to dive into what's next for the winners of a fight than it is for the losers of a fight. In particular, when it's a guy that lost a fight last night that he shouldn't have lost. When the judges take the decision from you, a split decision loss for Max Blessed Holloway. I thought for sure Max Blessed Holloway won that fight last night, in particular rounds 1, 2, and 3. If you want to give Volkanovski rounds 4 and 5, you can do that, but it's still a loss for Volkanovski in my book. And it's very frustrating for me as a mixed martial arts fan and a guy that covers the sport on this podcast and articles and stuff like that for the last 5-6 years to know that MMA has not changed in this regard whatsoever, that MMA has somewhat been reluctant to change their judging system within the sport, to change judging in general, and how these fights are assessed, how these fights are looked at, and how these fights are scored in particular. With MMA using that 10-point must scoring system is not only old, it is inept, and it is pretty silly, for the lack of a better term. And you have rounds 1 and 2 for Holloway and Volkanovski. You have those 2 rounds where I personally thought if anyone comes away from those 2 rounds thinking that Max Holloway didn't win those rounds, you're out of your goddamn mind, first off, because Holloway dropped Volkanovski in the first 2 rounds, both times. So how are those rounds not for Holloway? They definitely were. They definitely are. Beyond that, the third round, I think, is the round that everyone questions, and I understand that. It was a close round in and of itself, but I still give that round to Max Blessed Holloway. I still believe that Max Blessed Holloway won this fight 3-2. And as I said, if you want to give Volkanovski the first or the fourth and fifth round, I think that's fair. But you're still chalking it up for Max Holloway at the end of the day, 3-2 in a 5-round fight. I thought Holloway fought a much better fight against Volkanovski the second time around than he did the first time around. The first time around, he let Volkanovski attack his legs a little bit too much. This time, Holloway pushed through that. Volkanovski was still throwing the leg kicks, and when you're a fighter like Max Holloway, you keep so much weight on that front leg that it's very easy for the opponent to attack that leg and create more powerful strikes on that leg when there's so much weight on that front leg. That front leg essentially is stuck in front of Max Holloway throughout each and every one of his fights. So that's a facet of his game that he needs to change. He's changed it. He's tweaked it a little bit here and there. And he definitely tweaked it in this rematch to where Volkanovski was throwing those leg kicks, was landing those leg kicks, but they weren't as effective as they were in the first fight. Although the redness on the calf of on the calf and on the leg of inside leg of Max Holloway was there, I felt like he did a much better job. He pushed forward much better and just fought a much better fight. When you take a title fight away from a fighter, especially when it's a challenger that was a former champion, that was a great former champion, now you wonder what is next for Max Holloway when you lose 2 straight fights to the same guy, 2 straight title fights to the same guy. There's no path back to the title for Max Holloway, given that these were the results of this fight. no path back, and the fact that as long as Volkanovski is the champ, Max has already lost 2 straight fights to Volkanovski. How is he going to get back to the title? Volkanovski would have to lose his fight against said challenger, whether it's Korean Zombie or Brian Ortega or Zabit or, one of those guys, in order for Holloway to get back to the title. A true shame that the judges took this fight away from Max Holloway. I'm feeling for him today. I feel like Holloway could fight someone in the top 5, maybe a Korean Zombie if he gets past Ortega. We'll see. I'm Ryan Thomas. It was the Thomas Take. Take care.